Even one down the sideline, and he's got Cass over the top. Big side, down the sideline. Touchdown. His signature move and his signature performance. Allen, big ball one more time. 58 yards this time.
You're listening to the Bruin Bible. This is your host, Will Decker, bringing you UCLA football content all throughout the year for LA Football Network.
What is up, Bruin Bible listeners? Will Decker, your host, and the Madman coming at you per usual. Game recap a little later this week. I am so sorry. I was a groomsman and my college roommate's wedding. Had to miss the game entirely. Luckily, I had my guy to my right, and Ryan Dyrud, our founder, texted me the Bruins updates. It nearly killed me that I could not watch the game. All good things that we missed. But Madman, such a great game with a lot of individual performances out there. And I think we got to bring back the full game ball tradition we were doing last year because it's too much fun not to do it this week for all the players that we had and all the impacts that were made. Madman, talk to me. We're going to get into the guys, but from an overall perspective, you know, I laid this out to you before the podcast. The score may have not reflected it, but as a team win, that might be one of the most dominant performances I've seen from UCLA in a long time. What do you think about that statement?
No, Will, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think what really stands out to me is the establishment of an identity. And I kind of call it the 2 Ds. It's Dante and it's the defensive line. And, you know, to see Dante Moore in his first start, and I know you and I are going to get into it, but just the poise, the arm angles, the feet, the eye manipulation, the toughness on some scrambles. There was just so much there where it hard to believe he's 18 years old and it was his first career start and it happened to be on the road against a small but rather hostile crowd of about 30,000 down there in San Diego. And he was so impressive and fluid in everything that he did. And then when you look at the defensive line, Will, and you look at that defensive front seven in particular, 10 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, their ability to set the edge and not allow San Diego State to get outside the hash marks at any point, constantly be behind the chains, constantly be in second and long, third and long, is really what set this team up for success. And I think when you look at not just the landscape of this team's schedule, but when you look at the landscape of the Pac-12, the way to success is elite play at quarterback and elite front seven play that can disrupt the opposing quarterback and can disrupt the opposing offense to getting off schedule. And the fact that UCLA is so exceptional in both of those areas right now really makes you believe very strongly that this is a dark horse conference title contender.
Man, well, let's talk about the kid. Dante Moore was special is just an understatement, knowing this was his first career start in college. 290 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions over the course of that, Madman. And I highlighted a couple plays that really were just like, how is this 18-year-old doing it? You know, just different arm angles, like you mentioned, that 6-yard touchdown pass.
Yeah.
Carlson Ryan, that's just such advanced, you know, throw for a kid that's 18. There was 2 throws, though, that I saw that really impressed me. The first one, the 22-yard gain to Loya. It's not the touchdown.
Right.
It was the one on the sideline.
Yes.
There may be 5 quarterbacks that could have made that throw in the entire country. That is one of the best throws I've ever seen. Just a little bit too far in front of him. That's out of bounds completely. A little bit far behind him. That's an interception. He put that in a breadbasket that it's almost like you need binoculars to see how small that hole was. And he put it on a dime. They moved the chains on a 20-plus yard gain. 18-year-old should not be able to make that throw at the Division I level. It was a special play. And then the Matavao throw. I know that led to the Logan Loya touchdown. It was a 24-yarder. But what he did by, you know, the play kind of fell apart. It was clear his first and second option were kind of covered. And he just calmly, in a very cool way, delivered a beautiful strike over the middle to Matavao for a massive 34-yard gain. And just to have that sense of awareness and calmness at that age, Boy, we got something special at the QB position moving forward, man. This kid is it. This kid is the truth. I am so happy that he's the best quarterback in this room moving forward for UCLA. We're going to get him hopefully for 2 to 3 years if everything goes to plan. Madman, talk to me. What do we see with the kid? He's unbelievable, man.
No doubt about it, Thriller. And you and I have sort of talked at length about just how special this kid is. And to highlight those 2 throws in particular, Will, I think it was absolutely spot on. That 22-yard kind of sideline pass to Loya, you said he dropped it in the breadbasket. Will, he dropped it in the egg basket because that's how tight the window was there to be able to make that throw successfully. And it was just the right amount of velocity, the right amount of touch. And it's just that anticipation and that trust, not only in his arm, but in his receiver, really advanced placement stuff. And then the Matavao throw, Will, I think you said it spot on. What was most impressive to me is how he bought time. He was backpedaling. He was backpedaling off of that left hash mark and then threw it off of his back foot, but then threw it over Matavao's left shoulder where only he could get it in stride. Such a gorgeous throw. And really, Will, it was that drive, that end of that first half drive where he really got in the zone. Because if you look at, there was a 4-play sequence where 3 of the plays were just absolutely dynamite. That 3rd and 4 where he rolls out to the right and he dives for that first down pylon. Yeah, he's still skinny. He's still sort of growing in his body. But to have the guts, to have the toughness, to dive for that pylon, and then have the mental awareness on the very next play, knowing that might have been a questionable call. He got to the line right away and kind of threw an incomplete pass just to get the play started so it wouldn't be reviewable. Then he hits Matavao on that gorgeous ball where he's backpedaling and then gets the team to the line very quickly in tempo and then finds Loya where Loya makes a beautiful adjustment in the back of the end zone. 4 spectacular plays. It was effectively ball game. He looked like one of those great NBA superstars, one of your guys, Will, Steph Curry, on a heater there after a few 3 balls in a row, and it was just a heat check. And so many more heat checks to come here for Dante, but overall the 17 for 27, the 290, the 3 touchdowns, and it was just kind of the combination, Will, of throws. The other throw that I was particularly impressed by was the 81-yard touchdown pass to Norwood. Not necessarily because it was, to the naked eye, Will, that one looked like a bust, a coverage bust. But if you really zoom into what was happening there, Norwood, went outside in on the move. It was outside slant back inside. And in order for Norwood to be that significantly open, you have to have the eye manipulation to be able to set up the defense to be able to make that move. And the way Moore kind of baited and goaded that San Diego State secondary to go outside, that enabled Norwood to go in and then threw a ball that was not only just accurate, but so in stride where Norwood didn't break stride. And one of the real marks of accuracy there is, does the receiver change speed? Because if the receiver has to change speed, the ball isn't as accurate as it needs to be. And in that particular case, Norwood never broke stride. He started on a sprint inside and finished it all the way. So those 2 throws that you laid out and then that gorgeous 81-yarder to Norwood, it just brought all aspects of his dimension, Will. And I think we have our quarterback, don't we?
Yeah. I mean, if he locked up the job, lock and key, throw away the key at that point for our guy Dante Moore. If he's healthy, he's got to be QB number 1 moving forward. You mentioned the speedster, Josiah Norwood, 21.9 miles per hour on that 81-yard touchdown. That was the second fastest tracked in all of college football in week number 2. I want to bring it to our next point. The Bruins are back in the top 25. We were just put in at number 24. And I want to say a huge reason for that is I believe the country watched UCLA take on San Diego State. And I think the mark of great teams, as you mentioned, defensive front 7, yes, it's always there, but it's always got to be about the quarterback. I think a lot of these voters just saw what Dante Moore was capable of, and they go, okay, now I can officially put them as a top 25 team, because I think for us, one of the huge questions was, we know we've got the most talented roster we've had under Chip Kelly. Like, you look at front 7, you look at the wide receiver position. We're going to get to the running back position in a little bit, but we're kind of like, who's going to be the quarterback? Are they going to be able to do enough efficient of a job to make UCLA the top-end team that they can be? And I think Dante Moore delivered that. Madman, how does it feel for the Bruins to be back in the top 25? Because I think this is a big victory for Bruin fans early in the season like this.
No question about it, Will. I think it's very validating to what you and I were talking about all offseason, that this team is as deep or deeper than it's ever been from a talent perspective when you look at a lot of different skill positions and a lot of just different positional rooms altogether. And really the one glue, the one cohesive factor was going to be who is going to be the quarterback of this team. Because if you get solid quarterback play, the sky is the limit for this team. And I think what the voters saw, Will, was threefold. They saw an 18-year-old kid who's ready for the moment. This moment is not too big for him to be able to go on the road in a hostile environment and play a quality opponent with a quality coach like Brady Hoke, who is so respected in college football circles, had his run with Michigan, brought San Diego State back to relevancy, and to be able to win that game by 25 points in the modern college football era of especially a West Coast football where you're holding a team to 10 points, Will, in today's day and age, I don't care who you are, it is hard to hold a team to 10 points. So to see Dante in a hostile environment, to hold this team to 10 points, and then on top of that, Will, I think the Pac-12 had an outstanding showing over the course of the first 3 weeks. They got all the way to 17-0 as a conference before a couple of stumbles there in the non-conference. So I think there's a lot of respect this year for the Pac-12. I think there's sort of a West Coast bias the other way. I think the combination of this being the last year in the Pac-12 and so much notoriety that that's gotten, it's made people more aware and more tuned in to the teams that are out there. And so you see a really strong conference. You see a great quarterback. You see a great front seven. There's no reason this team shouldn't be top 25. And hopefully this is just the beginning for a significant climb up these rankings.
And get this stat that Ben Bolch, friend of the show, just tweeted out. Dante Moore ranks second in the country in yards per completion at 18.04, 10th in passing efficiency, and he's already 22nd in passing TDs despite splitting time with two other quarterbacks. So he's doing a special job in his early run at UCLA.
And Will, the one thing I'll say there, off of the 290 yards, Will, off of the 17 completions, Sturdivant didn't even really be a factor this game. And so the fact that Moore is able to still generate such big plays through Norwood, through Loya, through Matavao, and not necessarily have to always be relying on one guy. And, he got Ford involved a little bit there, second and third quarter, I think really speaks to how mature this kid is. Because it's one thing if you're peppering the ball to one player. There used to be those USC teams in the 2010s, Will, where Lane Kiffin would only throw it to Robert Woods the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, or only throw it to Marquise Lee. You saw that a little bit with Alabama, with Amari Cooper and with Devontae Smith early in the year, especially when you have a young quarterback trying to break in. The fact that he could get the same yards per completion in week 1 as well as in week 2, when J. Michael Sturdivant is 5 for 136 week 1, and you have another sort of wide receiver by committee in week 2, that is what is so impressive about this young man.
Yeah, man. And just so many good directions we can go with this. I mean, we could even go with Muasau, who was Senior Bowl Defensive Player of the Week this week. We could go with, the first in the nation in sacks, second in tackles for a loss, and Laiatu Latu next. We can go Logan Loya. We can go the running back room. But the guy I want to start with, man, Alex Johnson. We were on this guy early. We saw it in spring ball. We were talking with Pops. And we both walked out of camp going, is it crazy that a 6-year walk-on, we feel the most confident about him in the secondary. And boy, did he deliver 2 interceptions massively to seal the game for UCLA this weekend. Defense has 5 total picks through 2 weeks. It feels like DeAnton Lynn is leaving his imprint on this defense through 2 games, if you will. Talk to me about Alex Johnson, because I was so impressed with him. He's a guy that's very similar to Josiah Norwood, where we only get to see little spurts before this season, but every time you saw him, you felt very confident in his ability to perform. Alex Johnson, that is an understatement for this kid. He went out and balled this weekend against San Diego State. Give me your thoughts on Johnson, man.
So happy for him, Will. Obviously, you and I have spent a fair amount of time covering him in the spring, getting to know his pops, getting to know some of the folks around him. and kind of the perspective that he comes from. And I think that just there is so much there. And when you kind of talk to the people near him, everyone was like, this is the year we see it all coming together, because he's got the talent, he's got the work ethic, and it just sometimes it takes a little time for it all to gel. And what's so impressive about Johnson, A, is the closing speed, B is the hands, C, it's the instincts. He's always in the right place at the right time. And then D, it's that competitive spirit of not willing to back down. And you saw all four of those elements come to play against San Diego State to salt that game away with the 2 interceptions. And you and I, Will, both walked away at the end of spring, at the beginning of fall, saying, look, of all of the guys in the secondary, and it was a battle, is it crazy to think that Alex Johnson may be number 1 defensive back? And when you talked about those battles with Sturdivant in the spring, who was the guy that was kind of consistently standing up to him and giving him a hard time? It was Alex Johnson. And so it just shows that the hard work is paying off. I'm so happy for him. And he did an absolutely outstanding job, because there was a lot of smarts in where he positioned himself on the field there, Will, where you knew in the second half, San Diego State is not really a throwing team. Maiden is a guy who gets a little bit uncomfortable throwing the ball down the field. They were forced to throw it frantically. Alex Johnson saw the tendencies. Maiden always rolls left. He throws across his body down to the middle of the field more than he should. Where was Alex Johnson sort of positioned? Right there to sort of seize the moment and be opportunistic. Couldn't be happier for him. And I think this is the building block in what should be a really terrific season.
Yeah, and we had him as an all Pac-12 performer coming into this year. It was kind of our sneaky pick.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people may have thought it was controversial at the time. He looks outstanding. I am excited to see him go up against some of the more premier receiving corps in the entire country, and I have complete faith that he's going to deliver for UCLA. Next guy we're going to talk about, man, Darius Muasau. I mean, week 1, I thought it was an uncharacteristic Muasau game. He missed a couple open field tackles. It just looked like he was shaking the rust off. And boy, did he bounce back in a huge way. Huge tackles for a loss. He had 3 of them, the sack and the interception on the goal line, man. I mean, how many times did we talk about this last year? The interceptions he made against Utah, against Washington, those were game-changing plays by Muasau. And to do that at the goal line, a la like Malcolm Butler. I mean, did Maiden learn anything from Marshawn Lynch not getting that ball at the 1? I mean, this is common knowledge. Run the ball at the 1, but Muasau made a heck of a play. And like I mentioned before, man, this guy was the Senior Bowl Defensive Player of the Week this year, and not only for the Pac-12, for the entire country. Talk to me about what you saw from Muasau, because he was everywhere.
Will, he was such a disruptive force. I mean, he was in the San Diego State backfield seemingly before the running back would even get the ball. I mean, it was absolutely unbelievable. And he just sort of had timed the snap. He was coming around the edge. He was so disruptive. And this is the Darius Muasau we've grown to know and love, not just over the last year plus with UCLA, but in terms of his statistical output prior to UCLA, in terms of having now hopefully 300-plus tackle seasons. And that was the game cincher, Will. That was the other key sequence in the game to me, was in that second half, when obviously the one blemish for Dante was kind of the strip sack. Ball goes all the way to the 1-yard line. Here you go. It's 1st and goal at the 1. And you look at a situation and say, well, hey, if San Diego State punches this in, maybe goes for 2, you're potentially looking at a 28-18 game with a quarter and a half to play. And the defense, led by Muasau, did such an outstanding job of stuffing San Diego State twice on 1st and goal, 2nd and goal, and then setting up on 3rd and goal, the interception off of the tip, off of the kind of the contested ball there, and Muasau having the nose for the ball and the toughness to close that play. Just absolutely incredible, Will. He is the anchor of this defense. Latu is the game breaker. He's the pass rusher. He's the disruptor. But in terms of just overall anchor, the guy who can get into the backfield, the guy who's going to close the speed laterally off of tight ends, off of backs, the guy who's going to drift back into coverage and really create confusion in terms of traffic patterns and passing lanes, it's all Darius Muasau. And what a spectacular game. 6 tackles, 3 tackles for loss. And he was really kind of that stepping stone for the likes of Grayson Murphy to have 1.5 tackles for loss, for Latu to have his 2.5 tackles for loss, for Kane Medrano to come off the edge on the weak side because everyone was so worried about Muasau. I mean, it was just an absolute team effort there, but the head of the snake was Muasau.
Yeah, man. And we talked about this linebacking unit easily being the deepest we've had, since probably the Barr Kendrick days, if we're being honest.
Yes.
Oladejo, double-digit tackles, really exploded on the scene this week. Kane Medrano, you mentioned it, man. That first tackle for a loss really got the defense going, and that was eventually what led to the first punt of the day for San Diego State. So Kane Medrano making big plays. Linebacking unit was in full swing. And, dude, I think we just got to go to Latu. Are you ready to – because we posed it in the Over-Under podcast.
Yep.
13 sacks. And we're like, that's a lot. That's a huge number. I know he wanted 15. Will it happen? Explodes on the scene. He's got 4 sacks in 2 games. Are we ready to change the mindset on Latu? Because game record is not even it's not even an accurate description of him. It's like you're going to have to block this guy with 3 different guys if he keeps doing what he's doing right now. Will,
at the rate he's going, he's going to have 13 sacks by the end of the month. I mean, so it's, forget at the end of the year, just the way he's going right now. And it's unbelievable. His instincts are he's so dialed in right now. And I think it feels like, Will, he's lost maybe 5 pounds, but he's looking even leaner than he did last year. And I think there's just an explosion that's even more enhanced than last year. And I think where I see a huge difference is in the lateral speed, is in the counter pass rush moves. You and I kind of talked about this a lot last year. We had a lot of great straight line rushers, and Latu was a great straight line rusher. And where kind of maybe the lack of variety got UCLA in trouble in that Delora game against Arizona, when Delora could basically sort of get out of sequence a little bit, and those straight line pass rushers really struggled. That is not the case anymore with Latu. He has counters. He's got variations. The lateral quickness is different. He's got a lot more trust in his feet. And you're just seeing it. There's just no way to sort of guard him. He goes to the outside. He swims back inside. He's got the counters. And then he's such a havoc on one side of the field that then it opens the door for the Murphy twins, and it opens the door for Medrano, and it opens the door for the likes of Toya to be able to clog up the middle. It is going to take a Herculean effort, a gladiator effort at this point for me, Will, for somebody to try and dethrone him as Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year.
And I just want to say, I made a bold statement about this defensive line.
When do you not? Will Decker is nothing if he's not bold.
Oh, man. Yeah, I'm like Guinness, baby. I'm just all about the boldness, baby. But, dude, I made the statement, best defense, could be the best defensive line. I never said would be, could be. Through 2 weeks, PFF has UCLA ranked as the number 1 pass rush in the NCAA. So let's sit on that just for a little bit with that. Leader in sacks in the entire country, second in tackles for a loss for our guy Latu. And, I think we thought he was a first-round talent, late first round at the very least. We've had some studs come in here that weren't first-rounders, right? Your Greg Dulcich's, your Charbonnets, your DTRs, whatever it may be. Trevor Sikkema, friend of the LAFB network, has been on Guilty as Charged many of times, put out his first mock draft. He's got him going number 8. Top 10 pick would be the first.
It's wild
for UCLA since Josh Rosen. So what Latu is doing is unbelievable at so many different levels. So we've gotten through our guys, Dante. We've gotten through Alex Johnson, Latu, Muasau. Let's swing it back to the offensive side of the football, man, because I think it's going to be fun. We have a legit thunder and lightning combination with Carson Steele and our guy TJ Harden. And, I think we were both a little higher on Harden. And if you're looking at it from a small sample size, I think Harden, less carries, more yards. But, man, I was impressed with Steele. Steele was a thumper out there in the football field this week. That 3rd and 25 play, he didn't get the first down. He went right to the yard. I think that defensive back from San Diego State is still feeling that truck stick that he laid on him out there, man. Beautiful run. He had that 13-yard touchdown going for UCLA, on a beautiful T formation. And then we talk about the 59-yard run from TJ Harden to kind of match that. So you have the speed of TJ Harden, just an electric playmaker. And you got Carson Steele, just grounding and pounding and wearing down these defenses. Man, it is fun as hell to watch. It seems like Chip Kelly's finally got all the chess pieces in the right place in the running room to make it a full running attack for UCLA.
Yeah, Will, I think you said it best. And what I've enjoyed about this running back room right now is A, I think it's order, and B, I think it's depth. And I think Chip has done an outstanding job of the order. I think starting the game with Steele and allowing the defense to kind of feel Steele and sort of take some of that thumping and take some of that pounding and kind of go in between the tackles and sort of come around and really sort of impose physicality, impose violence, really. I mean, is every Steele run. And then the defense is a little staggered. They're a little sort of, black and blue after a few plays. And then you bring in Harden end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter, and there's a gash and he's gone. And I think the sequence that I think really synonymizes this, one was that second drive, Will, where Steele did an outstanding job of kind of getting the Bruins into the red zone. Dante Moore had a very incredibly underrated scramble on 3rd and 9 on that drive where he sidestepped, he found a way, he dove again, showed tremendous toughness, kind of came up. He looked a little gimpy. We were holding our breath there at the end of the first quarter, hoping that he was okay. That set up that 4th and 1. You said it, that T formation. Harden was on the field. Adkins was on the field. Yankoff was on the field. And Steele gets the ball, sheds that tackler at the line of scrimmage, and bursts it in. And you could tell that really kind of took the will out of San Diego State's defensive line in so many ways, because that was an accumulation of that earlier run on 3rd and 25, an accumulation of those 6, 7, 8-yard runs that was consistently happening in the first quarter. And then what happens when UCLA gets the ball next? Harden for 8, Harden for 6, Harden for 59, 3 plays, pay dirt. And that sort of variation of that sort of thumping and then the speed, the thunder and the lightning, I think is working huge dividends for UCLA. And what I really like is that Chip isn't kind of messing around with other backs. We thought that maybe Adkins would get more run. I was very high on Yankoff in the spring, Will, but I think the fact that he is sort of allowing these two running backs to get the lion's share of carries is enabling, I think, both of them to get enough of a lather, be in a position where each guy's getting 10 to 12 carries a game, where they feel like they're in a flow, and that thunder and lightning works out really well.
It really does, man. And, 9 carries, 91 yards and a touchdown for Harden. Carson Steele, 12 carries, 84 yards and a touchdown as well. So they are running at a high level, and I don't even think we've seen the peak of what they could potentially do. There's going to be a game where they ground and pound, knowing Chip, knowing how revolutionizing he is when it comes to the run game, where they're going to chew up about 250 to 300 yards between the two of them. I know it's coming. Could be as early as this weekend if we don't blow them out in the first half against North Carolina Central.
Well, Will, that's a really interesting point that you bring up, because I think one of the elements to the Chip Kelly offense the last few years has been their inability to protect leads in the second half. And now when you have this sort of two-headed monster that does two different things, even when you had Charbonnet and Britton Brown, Britton Brown was sort of a version of Charbonnet who just wasn't as good as Charbonnet, but it wasn't necessarily a complementary piece to Charbonnet. But here you look at two guys that are so complementary of one another. And then when you factor in the new rules, Will, where the clock now is continuously running even after getting a first down, I think it opens up an opportunity here for UCLA to be able to protect leads much more significantly into the second half of games than they were able to do, not just last year, but in years past. I'm really excited to see how that plays out.
Yeah, man. And, we'll be able to milk the clock if those guys are running like they were this weekend for UCLA. Big time performance from Logan Loya. And this was kind of something we had seen in small doses. We saw the touchdown in the bowl game against Pitt. We saw the game sealing touchdown against Utah. Very similar to Norwood and Johnson in the fact that when he did touch the ball, good things happened in those small doses that we saw from him. So to see him kind of get a more of a volume performance, made that incredible acrobatic touchdown catch right after the Matavao one in a hurry-up offense type of mode. We mentioned the catch towards the sideline. The one play that Dante had where he did an inverse rollout where the defender fell over and he just hit Loya inside for a 20-plus gain. I mean, like the advanced technique of Moore to do that and for Loya to come away with that, just special stuff. But I want to pose this to you. Do you think Loya may have gotten to wide receiver number 3? Because we came into this season knowing it's going to be Sturdivant, it's going to be Ford on the outside, and kind of that slot, it's very kind of thin who is going to pick between Cam Brown, TMA, Loya, and I guess Josiah Norwood as well. But Loya was the guy with the most catches on the team this week.
Yeah, no, I think Loya filling in as that number 3 slot guy makes so much sense. Obviously, we've seen flashes from Loya. You mentioned it, the Utah game last year, the bowl game. How about that Colorado game at Colorado last year where he caught that great touchdown pass at the time where you and I thought that might have been the greatest single throw DTR had made in his career to that point was to Loya. I think that Loya fits in very nicely in this third slot position because his slender build, I think, allows him to be able to find soft spots in the zone, to be able to kind of find patches where he can sort of catch the balls short. But then his speed allows him to sort of set up that counter where he can kind of bait a defense to stay kind of underneath and then blow the top off. And so I think that's a very unique skill set. And when you look at where this team is right now, Will, we haven't seen a ton of Cam Brown. We haven't seen a ton of TMA. Reports are today, Jaden Marshall is now starting to practice with the secondary, Will. And so there's a look here that, hey, maybe Jaden Marshall isn't going to be playing wide receiver anymore. He's moving forward. Obviously, Keegan Jones moving into kind of that slot role, but we haven't seen much of him either. So it really feels like this is an opportunity for Loya to solidify. I know that Kyle Ford has caught balls in bunches over the first 2 games, but I really do see a world here quickly where Kyle Ford firmly becomes wide receiver 2 in some critical moments. And then I think Loya sets that up so nicely as the third wide receiver.
Yeah, and these are all just preliminary games to Pac-12 play. And boy, do we kick it off with a doozy out in Salt Lake City.
Oh, man.
Stadium against Utah. We got to be talking and communicating during that game, man. Maybe we even find a way out to Utah or maybe one
I think so.
It's going to be a hell of a game. Game balls. We talked about at the beginning. I'm going to give the 5 out. Dante Moore, easily. Latu, easily. Muasau, easily. Alex Johnson, easily. And then who's that 5th one? I mean, we can go in a variety of different directions. Harden, Steele. We can go with Oladejo, who could be there. Am I missing somebody, or who would you think would get the 5th game ball?
No, Will. I would go with Oladejo and the 10 tackles. 10 total tackles. He was such a disruptive force, made tackles all over the field and did a really nice job. He was matched up on their tight end a number of times and kind of limiting those balls to just 4-yard gains, 6-yard gains, made things very, very difficult on their tight end. Really didn't get San Diego State in a rhythm. He was chasing Hayden all over the place. Hayden got away a few times, but forced Hayden to kind of throw some of those balls across the middle. So I think Oladejo, for me, is that 5th game ball.
Yeah, I think it's a great pick. Kamari Ramsey, got to give a shout-out. That 3rd and 1 pitch play to Armstead absolutely blew that up. I've been thoroughly impressed with the redshirt freshman out there for UCLA at the safety spot. So he's an honorary 1. Obviously, Loya, honorary 1 as well. Madman, always great to recap these games with you. We're going to have another one coming up this week, probably talking with somebody from the North Carolina Central space, just to get you guys educated on the matchup. I'm feeling very confident coming into this game, but you guys never know. We got to be prepared. You got to treat every game the same, and hopefully UCLA can do that. Any parting thoughts on the recap episode of UCLA and San Diego State, my main man?
Will, it's so exciting here. Obviously, there were some questions after the Coastal game. We've gone from 14-13 with 14 minutes left in the fourth quarter. UCLA, the last 5 quarters, has now outscored their competition 49-10. So there's really been a turning of the tide here with this team figuring out who they are. And I think it's going to be really fascinating moving forward, Will, how Chip manages the next 2 weeks. because you're going from NC Central to then Utah. And so I think this was such a key game. I think game one was more of an exploration game to see who's in my rotation, who's going to win some of these jobs, where things were sort of contentious in the spring. Game two felt like this was the true rotation. And I think game three, we're going to kind of go back to a lot of guys by committee because it is a significantly greater opponent. But I also don't think Chip wants to tip his hand in any way, shape, or form going into Utah right away. So I expect us to see 3 quarterbacks against NC Central, see 5, 6 running backs, see a bunch of wide receivers, a bunch of guys on the defense, because I think Chip is really setting up the game after the game. And so it's going to be really fascinating to see those rotations moving forward. Really, really exciting time here. And again, when you look at the landscape, Will, this Pac-12 right now and how loaded it is, there is not a definitively better quarterback than Dante Moore. Obviously, Caleb Williams is phenomenal, Penix Jr., Bo Nix, but there is not a quarterback that's a standard deviation better than Dante Moore. And I don't think there's a single defense outside of Oregon State that is as physical in the front seven as UCLA. And when you put those two ingredients together, there is really a significant opportunity to make a lot of noise.
A lot of noise indeed, UCLA. Don't contain your excitement. This could be the year for us, man. We got to get it up and rise. Keep an eye out for 2 guys to watch in Saturday that are true freshmen that could be some of the future players for UCLA that really make a difference. I'm going to look out for Jeremiah McClure, a guy that I saw that enrolled early that really played well in spring ball. Keep an eye out for him. I think he's going to get some time if the game trends as we think it will against North Carolina Central. And Grant Buckey, man, this guy is way too big to keep off the field. 6'6", looks like a legit 265, 270. And, man, he was making some plays in spring where it's like if our defensive line wasn't arguably the deepest in the Pac-12 this year, you'd probably be seeing a lot more of Grant Buckey. So keep an eye out for those 2 guys. I'm really excited to watch UCLA go to work this weekend.
And Will, the one last thing I'll say before we close, I'm also looking for a very comprehensive game from the secondary because the first 2 weeks, it's been sort of feast or famine. You know, obviously we're talking about the 5 interceptions. Obviously Muasau's got 1, but the secondary with the other 4. But they've also had their share of sort of whiffing and missing. When you even look at the San Diego State game, they dropped the touchdown, Will. They dropped 2 touchdowns, actually. You know, there were sort of 11 points right there for them to be had that really had nothing to do necessarily with, you know, UCLA's coverage per se. So I would like to see that feast or famine nature go away and for the Bruins to win some more individual matchups on the outside from a secondary perspective and really just kind of shut it down this week with NC Central.
Yeah, and they will have their hands full in some regard with Davius Richard, the starting quarterback, coming from North Carolina Central. Bruin Bible, we are officially out. Make sure you guys are liking and subscribing and tune in to us on Fridays on 1090 The Mightier. We've got a new segment coming each and every week, so stay tuned for all of that between myself and the Madman. Bruin fans, we're back in the top 25. Let's enjoy it for now. Let's regroup against North Carolina Central, and let's go out and beat the living hell out of Utah if we can. Best of luck to all. We will talk to you guys later in the week. Bruin Bible listeners, we've got a special sponsor for today's episode. It is AG1. AG1 has been something that I've really enjoyed using in my spare time. 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, and whole-source food nutrients in one scoop that you can use into your water. You stir it up. I use it before my workouts, before I start my day, and it has totally given me the energy I need to do the little things in life, like going to work, getting extra, an extra boost, a second wind, if you will, for a workout. Before I play pickleball with my friends, just it puts you in a good spirit of mind, and you're doing the healthiest possible thing by putting AG1 in your body. Make sure to check us out and get a special deal with the Bruin Bible. It's www.drinkag1.com/Bruin Bible to get the special deal that we provide. Once again, www.drinkag1.com/Bruin Bible to get that special deal. Now, back to the Bruin Bible.